The second Regiment of Renown pack just dropped for Total War Warhammer 3, bringing new cavalries to every faction. We're going to talk about their role in their respective faction, and whether they fill any holes that maybe that faction had. So let us begin. We kick off with Cathay and the Righteous Lances of Wei Jin, great Longma riders, naturally with stat buffs to their melee attack, melee defense and leadership, as pretty much all of these units have. For their unique selling points, they have armor-piercing damage, which the normal Longmas don't, so that's a nice bit of extra damage power there, gives them a few more options on who they can attack. They also have an immunity to psychology, which is always handy to have, but most notably, they have Guardian, which gives a 15% physical resistance to any nearby lord or hero. So this unit can kind of play the bodyguard role pretty well, looking after those single entities, especially as some of the characters for Cathay are quite squishy, the wizards and some of the lords, or they can just be there to help make the strong dragon lords even stronger. Given their mobility though, and the new armor-piercing damage that this unit has, they're going to be great on the hammer and anvil attacks. They'll easily be able to fly over enemies, smash them in the back while they're fighting other stuff, so it just gives them a little bit of a stronger option in that kind of more mobile area, which Cathay generally lacks. Overall, not a massive game changer for Cathay, but a nice addition all the same, especially to protect some of those squishier lords. Next for Khorne, the Heralds of Khorne's Fury. This unit is incredibly confusing and I'm not really sure what it's supposed to do. Or more that I do know what it's kind of supposed to do, but it's not really clear given the abilities and stuff that it has. So they have improved stats as they all do, and fire damage. So that's good for going after any regenerating units or anything weak to fire. That's always handy to have, although Khorne already has a lot of that in the army, so fire damage units isn't something they desperately needed. The unique ability they have though is where it gets a little confusing. So this Mantle of Immolation gives -5 melee defense to the area around and also -20 flame resistance. Now why this is confusing is because flame resistance is its own resistance, and it kind of implies that to be able to reduce an enemy's flame resistance they need to have a flame resistance, like the old Hearthblades here. So it should work on them. They have a 40 flame resistance. When the unit gets near, it goes down to 20. Okay, we can see the active effect of 20 flame resistance going down. That works. That makes sense. We can see the cause and effect. But this is an entirely useless ability if that is all it does, unless a unit has a 20% flame resistance exactly. Then you can reduce it to 0, and that might be useful. And I don't even think there are any units that do have a 20% fire resistance. So surely that can't be the case, right? Well, in the blog it says that this ability confers weakness to fire on all enemy units within the area of effect. If that is what it does, then cool. It gives enemies a weakness to fire, they cause fire damage, other Khorne units cause fire damage. That could be really powerful. However, when you fight a unit that doesn't have a fire resistance like normal Sargard, you can see that yes, they are affected by -20 flame resistance, but they don't have a flame resistance, so are they actually being affected? Essentially, it's saying it's giving them a weakness to fire, so shouldn't it just be the weakness to fire trait instead? It's all very confusing. I'm not entirely sure. I guess it works as the blog says it does, but it's hard to be able to see that in the game. Either way, this is a strong fiery unit that should be hunting weak to fire units. That's all I can really tell you. Next, a much less confusing unit, Oath Brothers of Tor, Warbear Riders for Kislev. Pretty much the same as the regular kind with the stat improvements, but they have magical attacks, and that is incredibly useful for what? That's right, killing demons, of which there are many in Warhammer 3, so those magical attacks are really handy, and Kislev is a faction that generally lacks in magical attack units. There are a couple, but it was a bit of a hole for Kislev, so these bears are going to fill that nicely. They also have their own bombardment spell, Call of Tor, which brings down a bombardment that does damage, but also magical attacks, and Blinded, which takes away a lot of enemy melee defense, melee attack, and accuracy. Ultimately, these are a demon-killing cavalry, especially good against other demon cavalries that they will wipe out very easily. Because all those demons have a physical resistance, and that is weak to magical attacks, these bears have magical attacks, so it takes away their physical resistance. You see their bombardment spell going off there. That's going to reduce their melee defense, make them take more damage. They'll also do less damage, so just a really nice cav for taking out other cavalry, maybe monsters and single entity monsters as well, but I think cavalry is probably their best target enemy. So a really nice cav for Kislev that fills a hole in their army of a lack of magical attacks pretty nicely. Next to Papa Nurgle with the Barons of the Bog, Pox Riders of Nurgle with a few little cheeky changes. They've got more armor on, so they're going to be a little bit tougher first of all. They also have Miasma of Rot, which restores vigor to themselves and nearby allies, which is really useful. And most interestingly, they have the Wasting Sickness, which reduces enemy damage output, which is nice, but also reduces their mass, which is kind of interesting and not something we've seen before. And the results of it seem kind of crazy. So this is the ability minus 25% mass of whatever unit they come into contact with. Also the debuffs to enemy damage there as well, and this is the vigor buffing ability. But there's two interesting things that go along with this unit. Number one, they are an anti-infantry unit still, pretty much the same as the regular Pox Riders. But the big strength of this unit is that because they have those damage reductions in that ability, that stacks with poison, which also does the same thing. So you can see these Sargard, their weapon attack has gone down to a measly 22 because of these two stacking damage reduction abilities. And that will affect every single unit they touch, so the more you can spread them out and get them to hit 2 or 3 units, it's going to reduce all of those 2 or 3 units damage output, and that's going to help your other units survive that might be fighting them, and also this unit themselves. So that's the first nice element this unit brings. The second one is the mass reduction. Look at these poor Sargard, 112 mass, down from 150, which means they pretty much weigh like goblins, so they're not very heavy seemingly anymore, and as a result they get tossed around more than a dwarf at Helm's Deep. And well, look at the spread of the unit. There's a guy all the way out here, with the furthest guy from him all the way over here, God knows how far that is. So just everyone is knocked all over the place. There's another guy flying all the way over there, so the unit spread is just kind of silly really. There's no formation of the unit anymore, everyone's just been knocked all over the place. And this kind of happens with just the normal Pox Riders, but taking away a bit of mass of the enemy, it seems to make it way worse. So if you want to disrupt the enemy formation, this unit is the one to do it with, especially if you can hit 2 or 3 units with them and reduce all of their mass, get some other monsters knocking stuff around. It's just going to get pretty crazy. But there they are, the Barons of the Bog, Crazy Toads. Onto the Ogre Kingdoms with the Sky Striders. These are crushers with great weapons, the strongest cavalry in the game. Except they are a little stronger with a little extra weapon damage. They have a missile resistance of 20% to help them survive, but most notably they have frostbite on their melee attack, which means they reduce enemy speed by 30%. Honestly, overall this unit is pretty much the same as the normal version, just slightly better at the job. The frostbite helps stop enemies getting away from them, so if they fight a cavalry and that cavalry tries to run away, they can probably keep pace with them and stop the enemy from escaping. Same with monstrous infantry or single entity monsters that they might go after. Basically, if you get into a fight with this unit, you're stuck fighting this unit until they kill you, essentially. Because Ogres already had the strongest cavalry in the game, now they just got a stronger version of it. So, good luck everyone else. A nice addition for the Ogres, but doesn't really do anything for them that they couldn't already really do. Now for Elslinesho, the Eternal Entourage. Heartseekers of Slaanesh that have perfect vigor, one of the strongest traits in the game because it means this unit will never get tired and lose damage output or slow down. They can always be working at full potential. They also have Obsessive Adoration, which is a passive ability empowering melee attack weapon strength of any nearby friendly lords and heroes. So this unit able to keep its damage output up all the time with the perfect vigor, and to kind of act as a bodyguard unit, although not really guarding, more just juicing up whatever lord or hero may be nearby. In this case we'll use the obvious choice of good old Nakari, who's already a crazy damage dealer, but why not make him more crazy? With the extra stats you can see 20% base, 20% armor piercing, and 14 melee attack as well, 624 damage. He's ready to ruin some lives. So they're good sticking by those lords and heroes to make use of that buff, otherwise they're pretty much just going to be normal cavalry, but they will be able to keep going a little more than normal cavalries that will get tired. So it's a nice addition overall for Slaanesh, but again, not really one that's desperately needed or doing anything that they couldn't already do, as they already have lots of damage dealing potential. And lastly for Tzeentch then, the Knights of Immolation. These are Doom Knights that have magical attacks and fire attacks, so something the normal version didn't have. And they also have a little bombardment in a similar way that gyrocopters bomb things. It just drops out from below them onto the enemies. They have a little fiery damage bombardment with warp flame contact effect on it as well, which has quite a few charges on it, but only recharges when they're in melee. So that's a nice little bombing run type ability. As I say, it kind of works similar to gyrocopters if you think about how they drop bombs. Pretty much the same kind of thing, but it has that fiery power. This is mostly good against infantry. Don't use it as I'm about to show you here. This is just an example of a good target that these boys could go for because they have the magical attacks and the fire attacks, and in this case the Beast of Nurgle is weak to both of those things, so it's a good target for them, just not with the bombardment. That's much better off being used on infantry, but for the most part this unit can provide a nice mobile unit that can get after weak to fire or weak to magic units. This isn't really filling a great hole for the army though, as there's plenty of magic and fire units throughout the Tzeentch army anyway. It would have been nice to see this unit get either armor piercing or a bonus versus large to give them a bit more of a defined role. Otherwise, pretty much the same as the normal unit, just as I say, maybe a little bit better at hunting units that are weak to fire or magic. So that is all the new units in the Regiment of Renown Pack 2. I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the future.